Most people believe identity is something you discover, that somewhere inside you there is a fixed self waiting to be uncovered, a personality, a nature, a true version of you. But neuroscience, psychology, and systems science tell a very different story. Identity is not discovered, it is predicted. And once you understand that, an enormous amount of self-judgment, shame, and confusion begins to dissolve. Think about how you usually describe yourself. I'm an anxious person. I'm not disciplined. I'm emotional. I'm independent. I'm unlucky in relationships. These sound like descriptions. But biologically, they are expectations. They are predictions your nervous system has learned to make about what is likely to happen next, based on the past. Your brain does not ask, "Who am I?" It asks, "What usually happens when I'm here?" Identity is the answer to that question. In predictive neuroscience, the brain is understood as a system that constantly tries to minimize surprise. It does not seek truth. It seeks predictability. This is why the brain prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar peace. Familiar suffering is predictable. Unfamiliar peace is not. This is one of the most uncomfortable insights people encounter. If your system has learned that disappointment follows hope, if closeness leads to loss, if effort leads to exhaustion, then the system will predict those outcomes, even when circumstances change. Not because you are broken, but because prediction keeps the system efficient. This is why identity feels so real, because it is reinforced every time a prediction comes true. You react the same way. You feel the same thing. You make the same choice. And the system says, "See, I was right." This loop is self-confirming. And once it stabilizes, it feels like who you are. But identity is not stored in a single place in the brain. There is no self-center. Identity is an emergent pattern. It arises from repeated predictions across perception, emotion, memory, and behavior. This is why it feels coherent, and why it feels so hard to change. When people say, "I've always been like this," what they usually mean is, "My system has been predicting this outcome for a long time." This becomes especially clear when we look at emotion. Emotions are not reactions that happen to you. They are constructions your brain generates to prepare you for action. They are predictions about what you should feel, based on context and history. So when you say, "I'm an anxious person," what you are really saying is, "My nervous system has learned that uncertainty usually leads to danger." Anxiety is the predicted state, not the personality. This reframes everything. Because if identity is a prediction, then it can update. But, and this is crucial, only under the right conditions. Most people try to change identity by force. They try to be confident. They try to act differently. They try to override their reactions. But effort signals threat. Threat stabilizes prediction. And stabilized prediction recreates identity. This is why affirmations feel fake. This is why positive thinking often backfires. This is why becoming a new version of yourself feels exhausting. You are trying to overwrite prediction without changing the conditions that produced it. Identity does not change through instruction. It changes through prediction error. Prediction error occurs when the system expects one thing and safely experiences another. But safety is non-negotiable. Without safety, prediction error is ignored. This is where awareness and the observer effect come back in. When you observe identity without trying to fix it, when you notice patterns without interfering, you introduce uncertainty without threat. And that is the only condition under which identity can update. Most people never allow this. The moment an identity pattern appears, they react. They judge it. They explain it. They try to change it. And the system says, "Danger, stay with the known." But when awareness is present, when identity is allowed to be seen rather than corrected, prediction loosens. Not immediately, not dramatically, but reliably. This is why real identity change feels subtle. There is no announcement, no breakthrough, just a moment where you respond differently, without trying. And afterwards you realize something shifted. This is also why identity change cannot be rushed. Rushing is pressure. Pressure is threat. Threat locks prediction. Think about how identity operates in relationships. You may intellectually know that not everyone leaves. But if your system predicts abandonment, you will scan for it. You will interpret signals through that lens. You will behave in ways that confirm it. And when it happens, or even when it merely feels like it happened, the identity stabilizes again. This is not self-sabotage. It is self-prediction. The same applies to success, money, health, creativity, and love. Identity is not who you are. It is what your system expects to happen when you are you. This also explains why identity feels tied to the past. Because prediction is built from memory. But memory is not a record of what happened. It is a model of what usually follows. Your nervous system does not remember events. It remembers patterns. And identity is the story those patterns tell. This is why people can leave environments, relationships, or even countries, and still feel the same inside. The context changed. The predictions did not. Changing identity, then, is not about becoming someone else. It is about allowing predictions to update. And predictions only update when attention softens, pressure drops, awareness replaces control, repetition occurs without force. This is why awareness-based change is slow but stable. It doesn't attack identity. It outgrows it. In quantum reset, this is described as changing state rather than content. State determines which predictions are active. Change the state, and identity reorganizes on its own. This is also where quantum language must be used carefully. Not to imply magic, but to reflect systems logic. In physics, systems behave differently depending on constraints. In psychology, identity behaves differently depending on internal conditions. Same principle, different scale. Identity is not a thing. It is a process. And processes change when conditions change. At this point, many people ask, so who am I really? The answer is simpler and more liberating than expected. You are not a fixed self. You are a system learning how to survive, connect, and predict. And once you see identity as a prediction, you stop fighting it. You stop trying to kill it. You stop trying to replace it. And paradoxically, that is when it begins to loosen. This episode does not end with a technique, because identity cannot be fixed with a method. It ends with a reframing, a deep one. You are not stuck because you are flawed. You are not repeating patterns because you lack willpower. You are not failing at change. Your system is simply doing what it was designed to do. Predict. And prediction only changes when it is allowed to. What makes identity feel so personal is not that it describes you, but that it feels continuous through time. You remember being this way before. You recognize the pattern instantly. You feel the emotional echo before anything actually happens. This is why identity feels like history. But neuroscience shows something subtler is happening. Identity is not anchored in the past. It is projected into the future. The brain does not remember in order to recall. It remembers in order to predict. Memory is not storage. Memory is simulation. When something feels familiar, it is not because the past is replaying. It is because the future is being pre-written. This is why certain emotional reactions feel immediate. Before a situation unfolds, the system already knows how it will end. Not consciously, biologically. Researchers like Georgi Buzaki have shown that the brain's timing systems are not linear. Neural activity loops forward and backward, preparing action before conscious awareness. What you experience as now is already infused with expectation. This explains something deeply important. The past does not live behind you. It lives ahead of you, as anticipation, as readiness, as identity. When people say, "I'm carrying the past," they are not wrong. But they are not carrying memories. They are carrying predictions that never updated. This is why identity change feels like time travel. Not because you are erasing the past, but because the future stops repeating it. Trauma makes this especially clear. Trauma is often described as something that happened long ago, but still affects the present. From a predictive perspective, trauma is not an event that refuses to leave. It is a prediction that never felt safe enough to update. The nervous system learned, when X happens, danger follows, and it learned it under threat. Threat shuts down updating, so the prediction remained frozen. This is why trauma responses feel involuntary. They are not reactions to the present. They are anticipations of the future. Identity works the same way, but more subtly. If your system learned that, effort leads to disappointment, closeness leads to loss, visibility leads to criticism, rest leads to danger, those predictions become identity. I'm someone who... This is why identity feels emotional, not conceptual. It lives in readiness, in muscle tone, in attention patterns, in what you brace for. And this is why trying to change your story rarely works. Stories come after prediction. Identity does not respond to narrative. It responds to experience under safety. This is where time, identity, and the observer effect converge. When awareness is present without interference, the system experiences something rare. Prediction without confirmation. The system expects something, and nothing happens. No threat, no collapse, no consequence. This moment is subtle, but it is powerful, because prediction error occurred without danger, and that is how updating happens. Over time, repeated moments like this loosen identity, not through effort, through absence of confirmation. This is also why people often say healing happened by accident. They weren't trying to heal. They weren't focused on changing. They were living. And something different occurred, safely. This is why pressure delays change. Pressure forces confirmation. Pressure says, prove this prediction right or wrong now. Awareness allows time. Time is not neutral in the nervous system. Time under threat feels fast and rigid. Time under safety feels spacious and flexible. This is why awareness changes time perception. People report feeling less rushed, less urgent, less behind, because the system is no longer racing toward a predicted outcome. Identity loosens when time loosens. This is where quantum language can be helpful, carefully. In physics, systems behave differently depending on constraints. Time itself behaves differently under different conditions. Carlo Rovelli and Lee Smolin both emphasize that time is relational. It depends on interaction. In lived experience, identity is relational too. It depends on how you relate to your own predictions. When identity is constantly monitored, corrected, or judged, it tightens. When identity is allowed to be seen without pressure, it softens. This is why awareness feels like relief. Not because anything changed, but because something stopped fighting. Most people underestimate how much energy is spent maintaining identity, holding reactions in place, explaining yourself internally, defending who you think you are, trying to stay consistent. When awareness enters, that effort drops, and the system reallocates energy to learning, to flexibility, to exploration. This is also why people sometimes feel tired after periods of deep awareness. The system is reorganizing. That takes resources. Identity change is metabolically expensive, which is another reason it cannot be forced. At this point, many people ask a dangerous question. If identity is a prediction, then who am I without it? The nervous system hears this as threat. But the question itself comes from the wrong place. There is no you underneath identity. There is no core personality waiting to emerge. There is a living system adapting moment by moment. And that is not a loss. It is freedom. When identity loosens, something unexpected happens. Choice expands. Not because you became someone new, but because fewer predictions are pre-selected. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of brace. You feel instead of prepare. This is the beginning of agency, not control. Agency. Control is rigid. Agency is flexible. Control enforces prediction. Agency allows updating. This is why identity change feels like quiet confidence rather than dramatic transformation. Nothing to prove. Nothing to perform. Nothing to maintain. This also explains why identity change often destabilizes old environments. People expect you to behave according to the old prediction, and when you don't, they feel unsettled. This is not because you changed too much. It is because you changed how predictable you are. Systems prefer predictability, including social systems. Identity change alters relational dynamics. This is why coherence becomes essential. Without coherence, identity loosens, but does not stabilize. With coherence, the new signal becomes reliable. That is why this episode leads directly into coherence. Identity loosens through awareness. Coherence stabilizes the new pattern. This is also why quantum reset does not focus on personality traits or self-improvement techniques. It focuses on state. State determines which predictions dominate. Change the state, consistently and gently, and identity reorganizes without force. If there is one thing to take from this episode, let it be this: you are not your identity, and identity is not your enemy. It is a prediction that once kept you safe. You do not need to destroy it. You do not need to replace it. You only need to stop reinforcing it under pressure. Awareness does the rest. In the next episode, we explore what happens after identity loosens, why some changes fade, why others stabilize, and why life itself begins to respond differently when internal contradiction drops. For now, there is nothing to practice, nothing to fix, nothing to become, only something to recognize. Identity is not who you are. It is what your system expects. And expectations can change. If this episode helped you understand patterns you've lived with for years, subscribing supports this kind of long-form, research-based work. And if someone you care about feels trapped in, "This is just how I am," sharing this may offer relief without advice. This is not about reinventing yourself. It is about allowing prediction to update. And that happens more easily than you were ever taught to believe.